Here is something that will sound mad. A single loaf of bread, the cheap, white, sliced kind from any corner shop, was once made to last a British family 7 full days. Not stale, not wasted, not a single crust binned. 7 days. Your nan did it without thinking, and the food companies have spent 50 years making sure you forgot how. Number 9 on this list is a trick professional chefs now charge you 20 quid for in restaurants. And number 1 is so simple you will be furious nobody ever told you. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because these tricks will trim your shopping bill faster than any voucher app on your phone. Let us count down the 25 genius British bread tricks that vanished from our kitchens. Number 25. The brown paper bag. Long before plastic bread bags clung to every loaf, your nan kept hers in a simple brown paper bag, and she had her reasons. Plastic traps moisture against the crust, and that trapped damp is precisely what mold feeds on. Paper lets the loaf breathe. The crust stays firm and dry, the crumb inside stays soft, and the whole thing keeps 2 or 3 days longer at room temperature than the same loaf sweating inside cling film. The baker on the high street handed your bread over in paper for a reason, not for decoration. A loaf cost about 4p in 1955, and nobody could afford to watch it go green by Thursday. Modern supermarkets seal everything in plastic because plastic looks fresh on the shelf, not because it keeps bread better. Your nan knew the difference. Number 24. Keep it out of the fridge. This is the one that catches everybody out. It feels sensible to pop the loaf in the fridge to keep it fresh, and it is the worst thing you can possibly do. Cold does not slow staling, it speeds it up. Here is the science your nan understood by instinct. Bread goes stale through a process called retrogradation, where the starch molecules recrystallize and harden, and that process happens fastest at fridge temperature, around 4 degrees. A loaf in the fridge stales roughly 3 times quicker than one left on the worktop. Your nan kept hers in a bread bin on the side, never the cold larder, never the fridge. The only time cold helps bread is when it is properly frozen, and we will come to that. Until then, keep your loaf at room temperature and it will reward you. Number 23. The vinegar-wiped bread bin. Mold is the real thief that stops a loaf reaching the weekend, and your nan waged quiet war on it. Once a week she wiped the inside of her enamel bread bin with a cloth dipped in white vinegar, then let it dry before the new loaf went in. Those invisible mold spores cling to the surfaces of the bin, waiting to leap onto fresh bread, and the acid in the vinegar kills them stone dead. A bottle of malt or white vinegar cost a few pence and lasted months. This single habit, taking 2 minutes on a Monday, was the difference between bread that lasted 7 days and bread that grew a blue fur coat by Friday. We scrub our worktops obsessively now and never once think to wipe out the very container where we store the food most likely to spoil. Number 22. Store it cut side down. A small thing that does an enormous amount of work. When your nan cut into a loaf, she did not leave the open face exposed to the air. She stood the loaf flat on its cut side, directly on the wooden board, so the freshly cut crumb pressed against the wood instead of drying out in the open kitchen. The crust acts as a natural seal on every other side, and turning the cut face down completes the wrapping with no cling film needed. The bread stays moist from the inside out. It is the same logic as turning a tin of paint upside down to stop a skin forming. Cost her nothing, saved her the dry, leathery first slice that everybody hates, and most people throw straight in the bin. Number 21. The celery stalk. This one sounds like an old wives' tale until you try it. Your nan would lay a single stick of washed celery inside the bread bin alongside the loaf, and the bread stayed soft for days longer. Celery is mostly water, and as the loaf begins to dry, it slowly draws that moisture back from the celery instead of from the air, keeping the crumb tender. A head of celery cost a few pence, and the stick could be used and reused for the better part of a week before it gave up. It is the gentlest, cheapest humidity control you will ever find, and it works on biscuits and cake too. We buy plastic bread keepers and special storage gadgets now, never realizing the answer was sitting in the bottom of the veg drawer all along. Number 20. An apple in the bin. Same principle, different fruit, and arguably better. Your nan would tuck a whole apple in beside a loaf that had started to harden, and overnight the bread softened again. The apple gives off a slow, steady amount of moisture as it sits, and the surrounding bread soaks it up. It works especially well on a crusty cottage loaf that has gone tough on the outside. A bruised apple, too soft to eat but too good to waste, was perfect for the job, so even the apple earned its keep. Two things kept fresh by the same trick, nothing thrown away. That was the whole philosophy of the post-war kitchen in a single bread bin. Try it tonight with a loaf that has gone past its best and see for yourself by morning. Number 19. The French middle cut. Here is a clever one your nan picked up and refused to let go. Instead of slicing a crusty loaf from one end and leaving the open face to stale, she cut it from the middle. She would slice what she needed from the center, then push the two remaining ends firmly back together so they touched, sealing the cut surfaces against each other. The crusts on the outer ends protected the loaf, and the pressed-together middle stayed soft because no cut face was ever left open to the air. Next day she cut from the middle again. By the time she reached the ends, the loaf was finished and nothing had gone hard. It is a habit borrowed from the French, who treat their daily bread with real respect, and it turns a loaf that would last 2 days into one that lasts 4. Number 18. Wrap it in linen. Before everything came shrink-wrapped, your nan kept her bread wrapped in a clean linen tea towel, and the choice of cloth was deliberate. Linen is breathable enough to stop the loaf going damp and moldy, but tight woven enough to hold in just enough moisture to keep the crumbs soft. A plastic bag suffocates the bread, a paper bag can let it dry too fast, but a good linen cloth strikes the perfect balance between the two. She would have a special bread cloth, washed and ironed, that lived in the bread bin and held the loaf like a swaddled baby. It cost nothing after the first purchase and lasted years. Artisan bakeries now sell linen bread bags for 15 quid as a luxury item. Your nan had 3 of them in a drawer and called them tea towels. Number 17. The whole loaf oven refresh. When a loaf had gone properly hard, the kind you could knock on the table, your nan did not give up on it. She would run the whole loaf briefly under the cold tap, just a quick splash to wet the crust, then put the damp loaf straight into a hot oven at around 200 degrees for 10 minutes. The water turned to steam inside the crust. The heat drove that steam into the dry crumb, and the loaf came out with a crackling fresh crust and a soft, warm interior, very nearly as good as the day it was baked. It is the single best thing you can do with a stale loaf, and it costs only the gas. The trick works once, so eat it the same day. But for those 10 minutes you have bread fresh enough to fool anyone at the tea table. Number 16. The damp tea towel revival. For rolls and smaller bits rather than a whole loaf, your nan had a gentler version. She would dampen a clean tea towel, wrap the stale rolls inside it, and warm them in a low oven at about 150 degrees for 5 minutes. The steam from the cloth rehydrated the bread without drying it further, and out they came, tender and fragrant, as if they had just left the bakery. The smell of warm bread would fill the kitchen, and nobody would ever guess the rolls were yesterday's leftovers. A loaf or a bag of rolls was money, and money was never thrown in the bin while there was a tea towel and 5 minutes to spare. This single habit, reviving rather than replacing, is why her kitchen ran on a fraction of what ours costs today. Number 15. Save every crumb. First pattern break. Here is where the real thrift begins. Nothing, and your nan meant nothing, was too far gone to become breadcrumbs. The dry heels, the forgotten crusts, the slice nobody fancied, all of it went under the rolling pin or through the grater into a jar of golden crumbs. She kept a paper bag or a Kilner jar of dried breadcrumbs in the larder at all times, and a second bag in the freezer for the soft, fresh ones. Those crumbs coated fish, topped a cauliflower cheese, bound a risole, and crowned a crumble. A box of shop-bought breadcrumbs costs over £1 now and tastes of dust. Your nan made better ones for free from bread she had already paid for once. The crust you scrape into the bin is the crust she turned into tomorrow's supper. Number 14. Croutons from the dry middle. When the center of the loaf had gone too dry to enjoy as a slice, but was not quite ready for breadcrumbs, your nan turned it into croutons. She cubed the stale bread, tossed it in a little melted dripping or butter with a pinch of salt, and crisped it in the oven until golden. Scattered over a bowl of soup, those croutons turned a thin broth into something that felt like a proper meal, adding crunch and richness for almost no money. A handful of stale bread became the difference between a watery starter and a satisfying one. We buy bags of croutons now, flavored and overpriced, never realizing the best ones come from the very bread we were about to throw out. Soup and stale bread were made for one another, and your nan never let the two be parted. Number 13. Eggy bread. The slices that had gone slightly stale, too firm for sandwiches but not yet hard, were exactly what your nan wanted for eggy bread. Stale bread actually works better than fresh here because the drier crumb soaks up the beaten egg and milk without falling apart into mush. She would dip the slices, fry them in a little dripping until golden on both sides, and serve them with a sprinkle of sugar for the children or a rasher of bacon for the men. It cost an egg, a splash of milk, and bread that would otherwise have been binned, and it filled hungry bellies before school or work. The French call it pain perdu, lost bread, because it rescues bread that was as good as lost. Your nan just called it eggy bread and made it on a Saturday morning without a second thought. Number 12. Bread sauce from the heel. Second pattern break, and this one will surprise you. That dry end heel of the loaf, the bit most people feed to the ducks, was the secret to the finest bread sauce on the Sunday table. Your nan would tear the stale heel into a pan of milk, infused with an onion studded with cloves, simmer it gently, and beat it smooth with a knob of butter. The result was a thick, savory, peppery sauce that turned a plain roast chicken into a feast, and it used the one piece of bread nobody else would touch. A whole jug of it cost barely anything because the main ingredient was a crust headed for the bin. Restaurants now list bread sauce on menus as a traditional accompaniment and charge accordingly. Your nan made it from rubbish, and it was the best thing on the plate. Number 11. Bread as a thickener. Long before corn flour and gravy granules took over, your nan thickened soups and stews with a slice of stale bread, and it did the job beautifully. She would crumble the bread into the simmering pot, where the starch dissolved and bound the liquid into something rich and velvety, with no floury taste and no lumps. A thin, sad soup became a thick, hearty one with a single slice. Spanish and Italian cooks have done this for centuries, and British nans did it too, quietly, without ever calling it a technique. It cost nothing because the bread was already bought, and it saved buying any thickener at all. Bisto built an empire convincing us we needed a special powder for the job. Your nan had the answer drying out on the breadboard the whole time. Number 10. Bread and dripping. This was supper itself on the leanest nights, and it deserves its place. After the Sunday roast, your nan saved every drop of dripping in a jar, and through the week, she spread that golden fat thick on a slice of bread with a pinch of salt. It carried the flavor of the roast long after the joint was gone, it filled a hungry stomach, and it cost nothing because both halves were leftovers. A slice of bread and dripping kept a child going from school until tea, and a working man swore by it. We turn our noses up at it now, but it was honest food that wasted nothing and tasted of Sunday all week long. The dripping jar and the bread bin sat side by side on the worktop, because together they were half the week's meals. Number 9. The panade. Third pattern break, and this is the chef's secret I promised you. The reason your nan's rissoles, meatloaf and faggots never crumbled on the plate was not expensive meat, it was bread. She would tear 2 slices of stale bread, soak them in a little milk until they turned to a soft paste, then work that paste into a pound of cheap mince with an egg and seasoning. The milk-soaked bread created moisture pockets right through the meat. The starch held everything together, and 1 pound of mince stretched to feed 6, every slice tender and whole. Professional chefs now call this a panade and demonstrate it on television as though they invented something clever. Your nan was doing it in 1935 and called it making the meat go round. Skip this step and your meatballs come out dry, dense, and falling apart. She knew the science by feel. Number 8. Fried bread. The slices too stale for sandwiches found their finest hour in the frying pan on a weekend morning. Your nan fried them in the fat left behind from the bacon and sausages, soaking up every bit of flavor until they turned crisp and golden at the edges and rich in the middle. A round of fried bread was the proudest part of a full English, and it cost nothing because both the bread and the fat were going spare. It silenced a big appetite for next to no money and meant the precious bacon went further. We grill everything now and pour the lovely fat down the sink, then wonder why a shop fry-up tastes of nothing. Your nan understood that stale bread and hot dripping were a marriage made in heaven, and she never let either go to waste. Number 7. Pobs for the little ones. On a cold night, or when a child was poorly and off their food, your nan made pobs, sometimes called sops. She tore stale bread into a bowl, poured over warm, sweetened milk, and let the bread soften into a comforting, milky pudding the youngest could spoon up easily. It cost a slice of bread and a splash of milk. It warmed a chilly child from the inside, and it used up the bread nobody else fancied. Generations of British children grew up on pobs before bed, and the taste stayed with them for life. It is the simplest possible thing, bread and warm milk, yet it carried real care in every spoonful. We reach for expensive puddings in plastic pots now, never knowing that comfort once cost a single slice of yesterday's loaf. Number 6. Cinnamon sugar toast. When the children clamored for pudding and the cupboard was bare, your nan turned a slice of bread into a treat in minutes. She buttered toast while it was still hot, sprinkled it thick with sugar and a dusting of cinnamon, and gave it back to the grill for a moment so the sugar caramelized into a crackling crust. It cost a slice of bread, a knob of butter, and a spoon of sugar, and it tasted like something from a bakery window. The children thought they were getting a proper treat, and in a way they were. It used bread that was on the turn, since a slightly stale slice toasts even crisper, and it sent everyone to bed happy. A pudding for pennies, conjured from the bread bin when there was nothing else in the house. Number 5. Brown breadcrumbs ice cream. 4th pattern break, and this one is pure genius. Your nan, or more likely a grander cook she learned it from, turned stale brown bread into one of the most elegant puddings in Britain. She toasted brown breadcrumbs with a little sugar until they caramelized into crunchy, nutty nuggets, then folded them through whipped cream and froze the lot into brown bread ice cream. The crumbs gave it a deep, toffee-like flavor and a texture nothing else could match, and it used up the heel of a brown loaf that would otherwise have hardened to a brick. It was served in the finest Victorian dining rooms and at humble village fetes alike. Stale bread transformed into a dessert posh enough for a dinner party. Nobody tasting it would ever guess its secret began life as a forgotten crust in the bottom of the bread bin. Number 4. Bread pudding. Not to be confused with its softer cousin, this was the dense, dark, fruited slab that used up the most bread of all. Your nan soaked a great heap of stale crusts and slices in milk until they collapsed into a mush, then mixed in dried fruit, sugar, mixed spice and an egg, and baked it into a heavy, moist square you could cut into chunks and eat in the hand. A whole stale loaf could disappear into one tray of bread pudding, feeding the family for days and costing barely a thing beyond the dried fruit. It was sold in bakeries by the slab for pennies and made at home from whatever bread had gone hard. Filling, sweet, and almost a meal in itself, bread pudding was the heavyweight champion of using up a loaf. Cold, with a cup of tea, it was a working family's treat. Number 3. Queen of puddings. Here was your nan showing off and turning stale bread into something fit for a celebration. She soaked fresh breadcrumbs in warm milk with a little sugar and lemon zest, baked it into a soft set base, spread a layer of warmed jam over the top, then crowned the whole thing with a cloud of meringue made from the leftover egg whites and browned it golden in the oven. 3 distinct layers, and the foundation of all of it was stale bread turned to crumbs. It looked like a pudding from a grand hotel and cost the price of a few crusts, a spoon of jam, and a couple of eggs. It graced Sunday tables and won prizes at the village fete. Queen of Puddings earned its royal name, and your nan built that crown from the very bread the rest of the world was throwing away. Number 2. Bread and butter pudding, the most beloved of them all, and the cleverest disguise stale bread ever wore. Your nan buttered the slices that had gone too firm for sandwiches, layered them in a dish with a scatter of currants and sugar, poured over a custard of eggs, milk, and a grating of nutmeg, and baked it until the top went crisp and golden, while the inside turned soft and trembling. The staler the bread, the better it soaked up the custard without going to slop, so this was the perfect home for the end of the loaf. A pudding that filled the whole table with warmth and comfort, built almost entirely from bread that was past its best and would otherwise have been binned. Served hot with a jug of custard, it was proof that thrift could taste like pure indulgence. Nothing wasted, everyone happy, and the loaf finally finished in glory. Number 1. Freeze it the day you buy it. And here is the master trick. So simple, you will be cross nobody told you. The single best way to make one loaf last a whole week is to freeze it the moment you get it home, before it has the chance to stale at all. Your nan, once freezers arrived in the home, would portion the loaf and freeze it, taking out only what she needed each day. Frozen bread does not stale, because freezing stops the starch retrogradation in its tracks, and the loaf keeps for weeks in perfect condition. Best of all, you can toast the slices straight from frozen, no defrosting needed, and they come out tasting fresher than a so-called fresh loaf that has been sitting out for 3 days. One loaf, frozen on day 1, gives you fresh bread every single morning of the week. That is the whole secret, and it costs you nothing at all. Here is my challenge to you. Try just one of these this week. Freeze your loaf the day you buy it. Wipe your bread bin with vinegar. Soak a stale heel into a bread and butter pudding and watch it vanish. Then come back and tell me in the comments which one worked, because I promise your nan knew something the supermarkets spent 50 years making you forget. Tell me which trick your own nan swore by. Your nan knew. Now you know too.